Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto and Batman's wife unite? A multiverse battle for justice and hope. Movie. Batman was doing something that he once had never thought he'd do. He was standing side by side with the Joker, Harley Quinn, Bane, and Ra's al Ghul, as the one person he saw as his best friend used his superhuman strength to break down the reinforced door to the Batcave, as Circe chanted a spell to bring in some help from other dimensions. With one more mighty blow, the door to the Batcave flew past them and embedded itself in the cave wall, and in the doorway stood Superman, Deathstroke, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Green Arrow. Sighing, already knowing where this was going, Batman tossed off his regular gloves in favor of a pair of gloves that had kryptonite set into the knuckles. "It doesn't have to be this way, Bruce," Superman said, trying to end the fight before he had to drastically hurt his friend. "There doesn't have to be any more bloodshed. Now stop this before it goes too far." "This went too far when you killed Luthor," Batman almost shouted at Superman, recalling with perfect detail how he had focused his heat vision through Luthor's eyes and used it like a scalpel to surgically cut away half of Luthor's brain. "It had to be done," was all Superman said before he said two words that would change the superhuman revolution: "Take him." Meanwhile, with the Naruto in his universe, Naruto was panting heavily as he stared at his friend Sasuke, who was perched on top of the head of Madara Uchiha. Now, had this been a month ago, Naruto would have thought he was having a case of deja vu with the situation he found himself in. But after fighting both Obito and the real Madara Uchiha and realizing many years ago that Sasuke was beyond saving, he quickly swallowed any feeling of nostalgia as he glared at the person he once saw as his brother. Now he had only one thought left in his head as he prepared his ultimate technique. "It ends now," Naruto told Sasuke as he began channeling wind chakra into his Rasengan. Sasuke smirked evilly as he prepared at Chidori. "With your demise, Dobi," Sasuke stated as he jumped at Naruto with his Chidori, ready to end his former friend's life. With little more than an annoyed growl, Naruto jumped at Sasuke Rasengan, ready to tear Sasuke apart, even if it was the last thing he did in his entire existence. Back in the DC universe, as the battle raged around her, with Superman's forces trying to get past the unlikely allies Batman had drawn together to stop her, Circe began looking for one mortal in another universe that Batman referred to as the Wolverine. Somehow Batman managed to remember someone he fought from an alternate universe for some odd reason, and another from a universe that had little to no technology, but more than made up for it with some mystical power they called chakra. It was then that she used her considerable magical prowess to find the strongest fighter that universe had. What she found was a boy with spiky blonde hair, 3 whisker-looking marks adorning each cheek, cerulean blue eyes, and he was wearing a black trench coat-looking jacket with orange flames licking the hems, a burnt orang tracksuit, some kind of pouch strapped to his right leg, black sandals, and some kind of headband with what looked like a leaf etched into it. Grinning, Circe began the spell to transfer them to their dimension. With everyone's favorite Claude mutant, Wolverine was sitting in a bar, in God knows what part of the world, calmly enjoying a beer when some drunken kid started trying to pick a fight. Normally, Logan would just brush the kid off and calmly keep drinking his beer. However, the kid just would not leave him the hell alone, which was starting to wear on his nerves, until, finally, Logan punched the kid, effectively making the kid sleep off the alcohol in his system. Sighing, Logan paid his bill and left the bar. Not even a few seconds after he left the bar did Logan feel woozy, which was odd seeing as how, thanks to his healing factor, whatever alcohol was in his system should have burned out by now. He then passed out as a dark purple circle surrounded his body and transported him to a fight that would define the rest of his seemingly never-ending existence. Back with Batman, currently it was taking every ounce of Batman's more than considerable skill to combat the one person he considered his best friend. Grunting, feeling both his age and the tiredness catching up to him, Bruce ran at Superman and reared his fist back to deliver a punch that would have shattered the jaws of lesser men. However, all it did against the Man of Tomorrow was cause him to stumble back a few steps. Quickly following up on his advantage, Batman followed up with a quick punch to Superman's gut, a knee to his chin, and then an axe handle-like blow to the back of Superman's head. However, that wasn't enough to put down the Man of Steel, who growled in anger as he grabbed the Dark Knight around his ankle and lifted him up, just before he took off into the air and threw Batman back to the ground. Grunting in pain, and feeling lucky that his armor had taken the brunt of the impact, Batman got back to his feet just as Superman touched down. "Surrender, Bruce, and this will all be over," Clark ordered firmly, silently hoping his friend's stubbornness would die so he wouldn't have to hurt him more. "Like it was Luthor," Bruce growled out. He then charged at his friend and let out a resounding battle cry as he readied to punch Clark one last time. Just before a flash of purple light almost blinded them both, followed by another equally bright flash of purple light as two new fighters were summoned from their dimensions to aid Batman's forces in overthrowing the totalitarian regime of Superman and his perverse mockery of the Justice League. A few minutes earlier with Naruto, Naruto growled in frustration as he activated his Kyuubi cloak, granting him invulnerability as long as it was activated, and sped towards Sasuke, a Rasengan in each hand. But just as the Rasengans were supposed to connect, Sasuke activated his Susanoo ability of his Mangekyo Sharingan, granting Sasuke invulnerability. Growling, Naruto pulled out one of his ace cards. He let Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, take control, changing his cloak to that of a giant fox with 9 tails swishing behind it in wind. With a roar that would have made a kaiju proud, Kurama, Naruto leapt at Sasuke and grabbed him in between his massive paws and jumped into the air, then slammed Sasuke into the ground, with enough force to crush him if his Susanoo armor hadn't lasted till impact. Kurama then let Naruto take back control, causing the Kyuubi cloak to deactivate. Panting in exhaustion, Naruto walked over to Sasuke's fallen and sneered at it, before powering up a wind chakra-infused Rasen Shuriken and then threw it at Sasuke's fallen body, tearing it apart at the atomic level, and he did this till the only thing left of the traitor was his Kusanagi. Picking it up, Naruto sighed tiredly before he collapsed in exhaustion. Just as a dark purple circle surrounded him and rose from the ground, making the young man disappear, just before it too vanished from existence. Back in the Batcave, letting a rare grin of triumph cross his features as he saw Wolverine and some blonde-headed kid appear. "Bane, get them out of here," Batman shouted. Quickly finished his fight with Green Lantern, Bane ran over to the two unconscious people and began pumping enough venom into his system to help him carry them. With a grunt of exertion, Bane picked up Wolverine and then the blonde kid, who was thankfully lighter, and ran out of the Batcave to the rendezvous point. With that, everyone else ran to the rendezvous point. "Detective," Roz called out from the exit of the Batcave, which would lead them all to the rendezvous point. "Go, I'll cover you," Batman shouted at Roz over his shoulder. But Roz started, only to be met by a Batman's trademark glare. "Go now," Batman ordered. With but a nod, Roz closed the door behind him and followed the tunnel to the rendezvous point. With the door closed, Batman stared down Superman as Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and Deathstroke fell in on either side of the last son of Krypton. With that, Batman began trying to formulate a strategy to take them down. He knew that if they rushed him, he'd be able to take down Green Arrow and Green Lantern. If they rushed him simultaneously, he'd be able to take down Green Lantern and Green Arrow, and with luck, Deathstroke. And if he snuck into the shadows, he might be able to take down all 5 of them one by one if Superman's super hearing didn't pick him up, though even Batman knew there was a fat chance of that. Growling, Bruce took the initiative and charged at them, throwing his 5 foes off balance as he, one normal, lone human, charged at them, 2 of the strongest metahumans, a super soldier, for lack of a better term, an intergalactic officer, and a peerless archer, with a resolve that could match their own. Meanwhile, on a top-secret mission inside the Watchtower, Nightwing, aka Censored Grayson, was leading a 4-man team consisting of Raven, Miss Martian, and Beast Boy, into the Watchtower's holding cells, where only the most truly vile or powerful villains were kept. Currently, they were trying to recover one who called himself the Arbiter, one of the few villains ever to match the Justice League. Currently, they were halfway to their objective when alarms started going off all over the Watchtower. Letting out a silent curse, he had Miss Martian phase down to the holding cells to release the prisoners, to cause a distraction while they tried to make sure of the Arbiter's location. With that done, he had Beast Boy and Raven cover him while he typed away at a computer in the deserted monitor room. 5 minutes later, the Arbiter's location was revealed, showing that he was at the very base of the Watchtower. "Raven, teleport to the bottom of the Watchtower. Beast Boy, you and me are going to secure the teleporters," Nightwing ordered. And with little more than a nod, Raven went to secure their objective and Beast Boy and Nightwing went to secure the teleporters. When they reached the teleporters, they found their old friend, Cyborg, standing there with his arms crossed over his metallic chest as he glared at them. Without a word said between the 3 former Titans, Beast Boy morphed into a Triceratops and charged at Cyborg, hoping to stop the fight before it begun, only to be stopped dead in his tracks. With a grunt of effort, Cyborg began pushing Beast Boy back, too distracted with the obvious threat to worry about the former Boy Wonder that silently jumped behind him. "I'm sorry about this, Victor," Nightwing apologized as he took a taser from his utility belt and placed at the back of Cyborg's neck, effectively shorting out Cyborg's circuits, for however brief a time. "Miss Martian, rendezvous at the teleporters," Nightwing ordered. "Raven, what's your ETA?" "Right now," he heard a monotone voice say behind him. With a 20-year-old man standing next to her, with close-cut brown hair, icy blue eyes, and a scar going from the right side of his forehead, down across his right eye, and stopped at the corner of his mouth, and he was wearing a black biker's jacket with two parallel silver lines going down his arms and forming a circle around his biceps, a gray undershirt, tan cargo pants, and tan combat boots with two holsters sitting on his thighs and what looked like M1911 Colt pistols resting in them. Shortly after they arrived, Miss Martian appeared and they grabbed Cyborg and teleported to Crime Alley in Gotham City. With Superman, Clark Kent, aka Superman, was furious. Not only had Batman somehow pulled off an escape that would have Mad Houdini jealous, but he also found out that one of the few people who had the power to stop him had escaped from the Watchtower, right as they were to transfer him to the Ark. At this moment 4 people walked in, 3 men and a girl. The man on the far left was dressed in a black zip-up hoodie, black skinny jeans, and black running shoes. The second man wore a purple windbreaker, a purple tank top, dark blue jeans, and purple Converse. The last male of the group wore a dark blue hoodie, a pair of sunglasses to conceal his eyes, a pair of ragged blue jeans, and brown work boots. The female of the group had on a dark red leather jacket, a light blue top, dark red jeans, and black combat boots. A blonde-haired man in a tan trench coat walked into a smoky pub and stopped at what he saw. Normally the pub would be alive with people drinking away their sorrows, paychecks, or any combination of the two. But instead the walls were splattered with blood, the patrons' throats were slashed open, and the only survivor was a little girl, in a blood-splattered dress, with dried blood being all that remained of her eyes. "Hey!" the man called out softly with a thick English accent, causing the little girl to scoot further back under the booth she was hiding under. It was then he heard a low growl coming from directly behind him. Quickly turning around, he saw a giant monster with 2 sweeping horns that ended at its horse-like nose, a mouth full of needle-like teeth, dark gray leathery skin, massive hoof-like feet that punched through a corpse it had walked on, claws that tore gouges in the wooden floor, and it had a tail almost as tall as the man itself, and that's without the foot-long stinger attached to it. Needless to say, the man summed up his current situation quite intelligently with just 2 words: "Oh bollocks." In Resistance HQ, it had been a month, since Naruto had arrived in this new world and had found himself in the company of the metahuman resistance, and so far there were a few people he would had come to call friends, with some of them being defined in the loosest sense of the term. He had bonded with Nightwing, Raven, and to a certain extent Miss Martian, Beast Boy, and Bane, and he had even began sharing gardening tips with Poison Ivy. However, he steered clear of the Joker and Harley Quinn at all costs, because there was just something about them that creeped him out to no end. What he hated the most about this place was that both Ra's al Ghul and Batman insisted he learned about the history of this new world he found himself in, though he couldn't argue with them much, seeing as they were 2 of the most intelligent people on the face of the planet. What he learned was astonishing. He found out this whole mess he had been dragged into happened when someone named Lex Luthor had tricked Superman into causing a nuclear explosion in a city called Metropolis, causing Superman's wife and unborn child to die. Immediately afterward, Superman used his heat vision and focused it through Luthor's eyes and refined it down to the point it acted like what they called a surgical laser, cutting away pieces of Luthor's brain that were essential for him to keep living. After this tragic series of events, Superman sought to perfect the world so no one else would lose their loved ones, and he did this by bringing the governments of the world under his complete control. Once they deemed him caught up on the world's history, Batman proceeded to have Ra's teach Naruto how to use Kusanagi to its full effect. Needless to say, whatever time he was not spending learning about this world or training was spent on one of his guilty pleasures, gardening. It was during one of his practices of his guilty pleasure that he met Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy. At first she thought Naruto didn't know a thing about plants, until he named each plant she pointed out and named what uses it could have in assassinations and espionage. After that the two immediately struck up a friendship and would often be seen in the mess hall talking about one plant or another. About a week after meeting Poison Ivy, Naruto had been in the training arena when he literally bumped into Nightwing, and had immediately challenged him to a sparring match which was declared as a draw, as Naruto had an unpredictable fighting style that at best was difficult to read, and Nightwing had used no small amount of finesse to even come close to hitting the blonde. Through him he met Raven and sympathized with the pale-skinned female's plight about having to keep her emotions in check, as he had to when he was younger to make sure Kurama's chakra didn't take over and cause him to go on a murderous rampage. He had become at best, so far, acquaintances with Miss Martian because he found her cooking to be somewhat good, and it wasn't poisoned, which was a bonus, and Beast Boy because they shared almost the exact same sense of humor. Groaning as he woke up from his deep sleep, Naruto rubbed his eyes, wincing a little as his sore muscles cried in protest. He flipped on the device that Batman called a radio and slapped his forehead as some piano played. He seriously needs to get some better music, Naruto thought out loud. Can't argue there, said a tired voice off in the doorway. Immediately snapping into action, Naruto drew Kusanagi, and was ready to run the intruder through, when he saw Arbiter standing in the doorway. Now on the first day they met, Arbiter had been wearing cargo pants, a gray shirt, a black and silver jacket, and tan shoes that he called combat boots. Now he was wearing a long-sleeved shirt with a cloaked skeleton holding a scythe, black fingerless gloves with a metal plate on the back of the hand, dark jeans with a small metal chain attached to a belt loop and disappearing into his pocket. He was wearing black tennis shoes, and on his hip sat a revolver he called the Peacemaker. Right as Naruto was about to ask where he had been for the past 3 weeks, he saw Arbiter pass out on one of the other beds in the room. Sighing, Naruto walked outside and almost bumped into a woman wearing almost skin-tight catsuit with the hood covering her hair and with 2 points on the hood giving the appearance of cat ears. Hey, can you watch him for like an hour? The guy is beat, Naruto asks. Sure thing, handsome, the woman answered with a slight purr in her voice. Blushing a little, Naruto began walking around, wondering what he would do with his day after all. His plants wouldn't need watering till later. Batman wouldn't let him go on missions just yet. Today was also his day off from training, and Nightwing and his team were away on a mission. Great, Naruto sighed in boredom, so much not to do, and all day not to do it in. Naruto had ultimately ended up in the garden Poison Ivy had created and he had helped tend to. Sighing, Naruto sat next to what Ivy called a Venus fly trap and groaned in boredom as he leaned against the bark of a nearby tree and he began to doze off. Pamela Isley, known to the public as the infamous eco-terrorist Poison Ivy, walked into her little patch of heaven in the underground compound that Batman referred to as the Citadel. When she got to the greenhouse, she saw Naruto leaned up against a tree, and about to fall right into a patch of wolf's bane. In a fit of panic she ran over and shook him awake. With a tired groan, Naruto looked at Ivy, and then placed his bare hand directly into the patch of wolf's bane. Quickly grabbing his hand, she yanked his hand out of the patch. Naruto, does your hand feel numb? Pam asks, frightened that she may end up losing one of the few friends she had. What? Was Naruto's intelligent response. At this point Ivy was getting frustrated, and was prepared to get Zatanna to help put the blonde into stasis to help prevent the poison spread, when Naruto looked at where his hand was and blinked in surprise. Been a while since I saw this plant, Naruto commented as he plucked the flower by the stem. Wolf's bane, also referred to as monk's hood. Poison can be ingested, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin. Only known way to counteract the poison is to treat the symptoms, which range from nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea for ingestion and complete numbness of the point of contact if absorbed through the skin. With that, Naruto casually tossed the poisonous flower into a nearby trash can and yawned. Cracking one eye open, he noticed that his green-skinned, red-headed fellow plant lover was shocked at the display. What? Naruto asks, seeing the shocked expression on his green-skinned friend's face. How the hell? Ivy managed to get out before a look of realization crossed his features. I am a ninja, remember I am trained to resist all kinds of poisons, Naruto explained. In the academy they would stick us in a gas chamber and would do a very complicated ritual to lessen the symptoms before we were poisoned. All Poison Ivy could do was nod dumbly and stare wide-eyed at Naruto as he stretched, then she heard a loud pop and saw a satisfied grin on his face as he rubbed his lower back. Just before the blaring of alarms and the flashing of red lights alerted everyone to an intruder. On the other side of the complex, in an almost empty storage room, a purple pentagram appeared with arcane writing written inside 2 circles. Afterwards, a man rolled uncontrollably out of the pentagram and slammed in the opposite wall. When somebody got there, they noticed a man in a tan trench coat with unkempt blonde hair with his arms wrapped protectively around a little girl in a blood-stained blue dress. The only other thing they found was a pendant in the shape of a screaming face, with 2 blood-red rubies in place of its eyes. Few hours later, Arbiter was looking at the pendant on the man's beside table with anger being barely concealed. He knew the person, who had made the pendant, and more importantly he knew why, but he decided to keep it to himself for now. It was then the man groaned and tried to sit up. John Constantine. Glad to see you're awake, Arbiter stated. A steel-like edge to his voice. Means I get to kill you later. Nice to see you too, the man, now known as one John Constantine, stated glaring back at Arbiter. How's that deal with the crow holding up? She's keeping her end of the deal, Arbiter answered, walking over to Constantine till they were nose to nose, and I'm keeping mine. And how many died just so you could? Constantine asked, balling his hands into fists and getting ready for a fight. Funny I could ask the same of you, Arbiter fired back, his hand reaching for knife he kept in his back pocket. It was at that moment the doors to the infirmary opened and in walked Zatanna Zatara, once a world-class magician who now was blacklisted for speaking out against Superman and his regime. Immediately the two magicians who'd been just a scant few seconds from going to blows stepped away from each other. Don't stop on my account, Zatanna stated, glaring at the two. Zatanna, Constantine greeted, his eyes never leaving Arbiter. Been a while. I wish it had been a lot longer, Zatanna stated, her blue eyes turning to ice. Why are you here? It's simple really, Constantine replied. I need your help. Immediately everybody's eyes widened at the fact the great John Constantine was asking for help. Superman, one of Earth's mightiest heroes, was furious after all he had dedicated untold number of resources and manpower in the hunt for Batman and his rebels, and his men had still turned up nothing, not even a guess. Growling to himself as he sat in his study, the walls lined with books on every subject known to man and a few that weren't, and numerous pedestals holding trophies of some of his defeated enemies, his favorite being the helmet of Nabu. Hearing the footsteps of two individuals, Clark turned around just as the door whooshed open, admitting entrance to Power Girl in the Martian Manhunter. Power Girl sighed as she stared at her cousin. Long ago he traded his blue suit for a black one with dark red boots and emblem, and most days he looked like it had been years since he last slept. Statues report, Superman ordered, his voice sounding strained as if he was one wrong answer away from making them beg for death. Still nothing, Jean answered, his voice its usual emotionless tone. Growling in frustration, Superman took a few deep breaths to calm down. He then looked at them. Expand the search area, Superman ordered, he can't have gone too far. Nodding, Power Girl and Jean left the room, with Power Girl wondering why she had stuck it out this far. She knew he was her cousin and he and Lois did kind of raise her, but that didn't mean she had to turn a blind eye to some of the things he did. Sighing, she shook her head. No need to think these thoughts with a telepath nearby. Having doubts, Jean asked. Of course he already knew. After all, it still didn't take much to overpower her mental defenses. Only every other day, Power Girl said with a sigh. Nodding, Jean knew nothing else needed to be said. After all, sometimes he had the same doubts she was experiencing. But for now they decided to focus on the objective at hand, finding Batman and his compatriots. With Naruto was currently sitting in the cafeteria, eating some kind of gray paste. Hearing a chuckle, he turned and saw Nightwing with a knowing smirk on his face. You think the guy would have actual food, Naruto said, picking up the paste with a spoon, the goop trailing down from the spoon and back down to the tray. That's Batman, Nightwing commented, chuckling, function over form. Well, considering he has a gadget for every situation, you'd think he'd have one that can make actual food, Naruto shot back, poking the paste a few more times. That earned a snort from Nightwing as he sat down. So what's Batman and Roz got you working on? Nightwing asks. Let's see, Naruto replied. Before breakfast it was learning how to do some weird attack at every angle slash thing. He's got you trying to learn how to do a Omnilash, Nightwing asks. Impressed after all the people who could pull that off didn't really use a sword. Oh, I learned it already, Naruto stated offhandedly, to a point. How do you learn it to a point? Nightwing asks, stunned. Liberal use of shadow clones, Naruto responded nonchalantly. Before Nightwing could say anything else, Poison Ivy sat down next to Naruto and Harley sat next Nightwing, immediately making Naruto uneasy. He knew that Ivy and Harley were close, real close. He also thought that they had some kind of previous less than professional relationship. He currently had to admit Harley was less creepy when the Joker wasn't nearby, which made her tolerable right now, as they talked about random things, mostly lewd, crude, or sociopathic things in Harley's case. With Arbiter and Constantine, Arbiter and John were sitting in the library at the base of the Citadel, poring over every tome, book, or demonology study from the past 6 centuries, trying to figure out what kind of demon it was that appeared in the pub, where John had rescued the girl. The fruits of their labor was essentially nothing. Zip. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Growling to himself, Arbiter shoved another manuscript off to the side and grabbed a bunch of papers, still searching for anything that matched the description of the demon Constantine described. Should have just killed you, Arbiter muttered, feeling a headache starting at the back of his skull and working its way forward. All John did was snort as he flipped through another page of an ancient tome written by some nameless necromancer from 5 centuries ago. Not much longer, whispered a voice in Arbiter's head. Looking around the room, he saw a woman standing in front of a bookshelf closest to him. The woman couldn't have been older than 25, with hair the color of raven's feathers, oval eyes as black as night, a cloak of crow's feathers hanging from her slim shoulders, a black dress that was cut just a little low in the front and seemed to drag along the floor, a sword hanging from her hip on her left side that seemed out of place with her ensemble, and long nails that were painted black and filed to points. With Naruto was glad that he was finally getting to stretch his legs. It's not that he didn't like the Citadel, it's just that he hated being locked down to one place for too long. It took some convincing, and having to learn Batman's different tells from Nightwing and Catwoman, who had apparently had a very intimate relationship with him, but eventually he was able to convince him that since none of Superman's regime had ever seen or heard of him before then, combined with his henge jutsu for some added assurance, he could travel around any city incognito. Currently he was walking around Central City enjoying the sights and sounds. However, this was stopped as he heard a woman scream, loud, attention getting the works. Batman had warned him before he left to keep a low profile, basically let the cops handle things if there was a crime, but his conscience would not allow it. Sighing, Naruto jumped to the top of the nearest building, after checking to make sure no one was looking, and changed out of his civilian attire, black shirt, jeans, and running shoes, into his ninja gear. After he spent 30 seconds free running across the rooftops, Naruto got to the source of the scream, a woman in a brown coat, white blouse, and purple knee-length skirt, with brown hair was backed against a wall fearfully, as 3 guys stepped closer with malicious grins. "Give us the purse," the biggest guy of the group demanded, waving around a switchblade knife threateningly. Just as the lady was about to toss her purse to her attackers, they all heard something like the rustling of a cape. Curiously, they all looked up and saw a silhouette descending on them. The silhouette dropped behind the guy in the center of the group and punched him at the base of the skull, just hard enough to knock him out. The guy to the right looked surprised just as Naruto's fist slammed into his face, sending him to dreamland. Turning around, he saw the last guy holding the woman around the neck with knife pressed to her throat. "Either you let me go or I'll kill this bitch. I swear to God," the last mugger shouted fearfully, only to get ripped away from the woman and to see 2 blood-red eyes with slits for pupils. "Swear to me," the voice said in a deep, scratchy baritone, just before the owner of the voice headbutted him. After that, the both of them disappeared in plumes of smoke. Back on the rooftop, Naruto smirked behind his new black half-face mask. "Not bad if I do say so myself," Naruto said with a smirk on his face. It was then he felt something akin to a brick wall slam into him. Doing a mid-air recovery, Naruto was able to land on the roof across from the one he had been on, and he turned around and saw something odd even by his standards. There was a man on the roof. He had just been knocked from standing 9 feet 7 with a hangman's noose around his neck that was severed about 3 feet from the knot, deathly pale skin and hair, wearing a tuxedo jacket that had been ripped and shredded to hell, a pair of frayed and torn tuxedo pants, and shoes that looked like they had been expensive at one point but now looked like they were about to fall apart. "Grundy Crush," the thing that identified itself as Grundy declared, shaking one of its huge fists at Naruto. "Bring it, tough guy," Naruto shouted, readying a Rasengan. With a shout, Naruto jumped at Grundy, ready to deliver a Rasengan to the creature's stomach. Only to be beaten to the punch as a green-skinned man with red eyes wearing a blue cape with a collar that went up to the base of his skull. 2 red straps that formed a X across the center of his chest, blue knee-high boots, and what looked like blue underwear, and a blonde-haired woman wearing a white unitard with a hole cut out, which revealed a rather fair amount of her rather large assets, a red cap held firmly to her shoulders by a gold clasp and chain, and blue boots that went halfway up her shins slammed down onto Grundy with all the force of falling boulder. Naruto immediately cut the chakra flow to his Rasengan and looked at the 2 newcomers. "I could have taken him," Naruto said, crossing his arms over his chest. It was then that the 2 heroes looked at Naruto stoically. You ever see this guy before? Power Girl thought, using her X-ray vision to try and get a look at the rest of the guy's face. No, Jun replied mentally. Good enough for me, Kara thought as she flew at Naruto. Seeing the girl flying at him, and witnessing what had happened to Grundy, Naruto did the sensible thing and jumped down the alley, narrowly avoiding getting a flying haymaker to the chest that could shatter the faces on the Hokage monument back home. Well, this just go interesting, Naruto said out loud, seemingly not noticing the green-skinned man rising out of the ground behind him until he had his hands wrapped around Naruto's skull and entered his mind. Arbiter and John were in the pub where John had encountered a demon, and the scenery showed signs of demon activity, if the blood-splattered walls were anything to go by, and all they had come up with as far as the demon was concerned was that it must take someone exceptionally powerful to drag that thing out of hell and keep it under control. But what caught the attention of both men as soon as they entered the bar was the woman in the dark red biker's jacket sitting at the bar, downing a glass of whiskey. Hello brother, the woman greeted, her voice sounding scratchy as she put her glass back on the bar. Justicar, Arbiter said curtly, his hand reaching for his peacemaker pistol. I should have known, though I thought demons were Sovereign's thing. You know that gun doesn't do anything to me, Justicar said, pulling 2 more glasses from behind the bar and placing them on the bar. I hear it's customary to offer a dead man a last drink. Who said I was dead man? Arbiter fired back, feeling a warm breath on the back of his neck. My pet does, Justicar answered, pouring whiskey into all the glasses. John just seemed to take the whole situation nonchalantly as he pulled out a pack of cigarettes and put one into his mouth. Don't suppose you got light, John asked, making like he was searching his pockets for a lighter. Your charms won't work on my pet Mr. Constantine, Justicar said, sitting a Zippo on the bar. Thanks love, John thanked Justicar, cursing inwardly, but taking the lighter and lighting his cigarette. Interesting pet, Arbiter stated, sitting next to his sister and downing the glass of whiskey. Didn't come cheap, Justicar replied bitterly. One thing about your pet's rampage has me puzzled, Arbiter said, pouring himself another glass. What's that? Justicar asked, feeling a kind of déjà vu. Why spare the girl? John answered for the both of them, downing his glass and then taking a drag on his cigarette. Justicar just turned and looked at Arbiter before she levitated another bottle of whiskey, this one with a black label and the brand name Old American Friend Jack Daniels. All Arbiter could do was scoff in disbelief. So that's what this is about, Arbiter stated, it's about our father. Right bastard I guess, John asked, having more than his fair share of abusive parents. Our idea of a good day was him coming home sober enough to at least pretend he could walk straight, Justicar answered. Still doesn't explain the girl, John stated, taking another drag on his cigarette and eyeing the demon at the door. Not to you it doesn't, Arbiter said, flipping his glass over, though I am curious Constantine, how have you evaded Superman's regime so far? I'm a conman squire, John stated, taking one last drag on his cigarette. And a lot of infernal beings will owe me a lot of favors when you die, Justicar stated, flipping glass over. As if a signal had gone off, Arbiter turned around and fired a shot at Justicar's pet. Justicar kicked herself away from the bar, and John Constantine jumped behind the bar. Her pet roared a challenge and charged at the obvious threat, Arbiter. Damn, Arbiter shouted, just barely dodging a dark blue blast of magic. However, this caused Demon to grab him and bring him close to its face. Damn dude, Arbiter said, deciding a little snark was necessary, you're fugly. The demon roared in anger and raised Arbiter above its head, as it reared its free hand and extended its hook-like claws, ready to spill his guts all over the hardwood floor. With Jun in Naruto's Mindscape, now Jun had done his fair share of mindwalking in his time as a member of the incarnations of the Justice League, and normally even the most well-defended mind only had a mindscape the size of a modest house. However, this person's mindscape was roughly the size of a city, at least that was the view he was getting from atop this mountain. Sensing a presence nearby, he turned and saw the man he and Kara had been fitting, though his face mask was missing. I'd get out of here if I were you, the man stated, seemingly to not be interested by the fact someone had invaded his mind. And if I won't, Jun asked, glaring at the man. Then I'm not responsible for what happens next, the man stated. Just before a pair of giant paws slammed down either side of him, the paws seemed to have opposable thumbs, which Jun found only slightly weird, and were covered in red-orange fur, Following the legs, the paws came attached to. Straight up, he saw that they connected to a massive vulpine body with 9 tails that seemed to sway in a non-existent breeze. It was then Jean saw the face of the creature. It had black markings around its blood-red eyes, long ears that seemed to be a mixture of a fox and a rabbit, and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. "Get out!" demanded a deep, booming baritone voice that came from the creature, just before it let out a roar that shook the ground beneath Jean's feet. Back in the real world, Kara's superhuman hearing picked up a sound she never thought she'd hear: Jean Jones, aka the Martian Manhunter, screaming in pain. Quickly flying down into the alley, she saw Jean clutching his head in pain and the man that should have been there nowhere to be seen. "Jean," Kara called out, using her superspeed to rush over to her comrade and grabbed his hands. "What happened?" "Monster," was Jean's only answer. "Thanks."